in the future, when humanity has left Earth behind and likely forgotten it, at some point in the far future, I think we'll come across the golden record. And at this rate, it's already past Pluto and entering deep space. It's far out there, and I think that we'll lose it. And at some point in the far future, we'll find it again, and we'll learn a little bit about our technology, about our past, our history, and what we were before we ascended beyond Homo sapiens, if we do evolve beyond that. And I think that this is important, to remember our history, but also I think it's very important to remember our technological advancements, our achievements, and relearning how to make them. And I say relearning because I believe that at some point in the far future, humanity or the universe will undergo a great freeze or a great crunch, a heat death, something, and the universe will collapse in on itself or just keep expanding, and maybe it'll reset, maybe it'll restart the same as before, infinitely, or it will restart as something different. And I've been thinking, if we cannot, as I believe, if I'm correct, we're four-dimensional beings. If either three or four-dimensional, I think we're four-dimensional technically. And if we want to carry on our history and our knowledge of our past and knowledge of advanced technologies, from the ground up, from fire all the way to whatever may exist in the future. I think if we want to remember that, then we'll have to develop a golden record of some type that can traverse dimensions. And I don't think that there's any point to creating a computer chip, to creating some sort of flash drive that will carry the information into another universe, into a future universe, because I think that it will get destroyed in the process, going through a wormhole, white hole, black hole, whatever it may be. I think it won't survive that. And if it does, it might be damaged in the process. And so I think there's almost no point to carrying our technology into another existence, another dimension, or another future universe, using that method. But I do think that there's another method. I think that it lies in the dimensions. I think that perhaps we can carry our past, our history, and our technology, all of our knowledge, using the dimensions, the higher dimensions. I'm aware of the five dimensions, shapes, shapes that are cubic, that you can see within and beyond, inside of and outside of, at the same time, in all points of time. I'm aware that's, I believe, the fifth or sixth dimension. But there's I think, in my personal opinion, a seven-dimensional God, a seven-dimensional being, a God that declares himself as the beginning and the seventh, or the 7 times 70 God. And this is, I think, from what I've observed, the highest dimension that, at least that I've been able to grasp, is 5 or 6 dimensions. I forget which is which, but understanding time going forward and backward, and seeing within and outside of an object at the same time is the it's the limit of what I think we could understand when studying the higher dimensions. But the seventh dimension, if I'm correct, is the one where an object can exist as two separate things at the same time, which is sort of, it falls into quantum superpositioning. And so I think that's why the God of the Bible, and this gets into religion and higher powers. But I think that's where we have to go in order to figure this out. And I'm getting somewhere technological, I'm getting somewhere scientific with this. So hold on. If you're not into religious theories and aspects, but if God's number is the number seven, then I think that's related to the seven dimensions, the seven levels of existence, of creation, of consciousness, of spirituality that exists. The seventh dimension, of course, being love. And I get some of this from the Interstellar movie, and some I think it's, what's the word, quirky or cheesy, but I do think that perhaps love, some emotion or sentience, consciousness itself, is perhaps the seventh dimension. So in a way, therefore, we are perhaps in a way seven dimensional beings, but we can't tap into the other ones because of certain limitations. It's sort of like gravity. We can't see it or smell it. We can feel it, but we can't really fight gravity in the way that we can like control it, if that makes sense. I can't think of a better way to explain it at all. But I personally think that God is a seven-dimensional being, um, and perhaps we are four or five dimensional in a sense. We have consciousness, we have love and other emotions. The other animals don't seem to have humor. I never see an animal laugh. That's something I've noticed, is that animals cannot laugh. I don't think they have a sense of humor. I don't think they're capable of that. But we have these things that grant us a higher level of dimensionality, I guess. And we can't go backwards in time, and we can't go into the future. We just keep going slowly forward, picosecond by picosecond. And we can't see within an object and outside of an object at the same time. Nor can we see two objects as the same thing at the same time. So we're not technically six or seven dimensional, but I think that we are perhaps in a way five dimensional because of those other aspects. It's God would technically be seven dimensional because he has consciousness or love or whatever that thing is that's seven dimensional, and we have that too. So in a way, we are kind of seven dimensional, but we don't have those other abilities. So in a way, that's kind of why I say we're five dimensional, because we're missing the other things that make us truly seven dimensional, if that makes sense. But my point here is that God is a seven dimensional being in my belief, and that's why there's this obsession with the number seven in the Bible. God's obsession with the number seven, and and six, of course, being the number of man. So perhaps it's alluding to humanity being in the sixth dimension somehow. Perhaps we're just not able to tap into it yet. But I think that's why the number of the Antichrist is involved with the number six, and humanity created, if I'm correct, on the sixth day. Six refers to humanity. It refers to our existence. We're in the sixth dimension, being on Earth in this universe, I think. And the interesting thing is that light is, if I'm correct, in the seventh dimension. Light is that one thing that I think we can tap into in this existence that is within also the seventh dimension. Now, I'm not stating that light itself is love or light is consciousness, but I think that it's a part of it. It makes up the seventh dimension, and it all goes back to, in the beginning, God separated the waters from the darker, deeper waters, and he said, "Let there be light," and that was the first thing, and that corresponds, that correlates. It's in line with the Big Bang, and how there was a flash of light, of energy, of light in the beginning, and photons are the fastest moving, most ancient most high energy waves are not even really particles, I guess, but waves of energy in existence. They're they're the smallest thing. They're the oldest. Everything about them makes them extremely unique and at a higher level than everything else. Light gives us our perception of existence. It's light that allows for the different wavelengths, the visible and the infrared and the gamma spectrum, all these different spectrums. I believe even the atoms and subatomic particles themselves are in a way made up of a very low frequency, low movement form of light, of photon energy, whatever it is. And I don't think anybody should doubt or at least like highly criticize what I'm saying, because we don't really even know that much anyway to begin with. And so it's my speculation that God is a seven-dimensional being, and his highest form of creation, the first of course being light. And I think that perhaps in the extremely far future, if we make it to that point, I think that we could use light. We could use some lower state or higher state. I don't know what, but some form of light, of photon energy, to imprint our information, our memories, our emotions, even visuals, even audio and visuals of our history. Because the I think when we speak, it's related to radio or microwaves. I forget what it is, but it's when we speak it, it sends out I forget which form of energy, but when we speak, it sends out some form of energy, and that's like why sound will bounce around. It's waves of energy bouncing around, and it interacts with our eardrums, and it sends the signals to our brain, and we interpret that sound based off of its frequency. And then when it comes to light, everything we see is on the visible spectrum, the rainbow spectrum, and or Roy GBV, whatever it is, and all that is because of photons, because of light, the visible light spectrum. There are other spectrums, many other spectrums, perhaps even ones that we aren't aware of. I don't see how, but I'm sure we'll discover much more in the future. But everything that we see around us is because of light energy, and I believe that the light stores images. I think that whenever a light interacts with an object, it imprints that information onto the photons. And I believe that we could use photons in the extremely far future, using a horrifically advanced technology. The technology, I think, would have to be, I don't even know. It would take quadrillions of humans and a Google plexus of data to create such a technology. But I believe that we could use the imprinted photons to interact with creation to relive a moment in time. We could, for instance, use a flashlight on, let's say, a person who's walking by, and then take those photons that bounced off the person, and we could tweak the photons to reenact that moment, using the same person with the same moment in time imprinted on the photons, the very literal moment in time, not just a copy of the person or their actions, but literally that very moment in time could be warped, could be recreated by tapping into the fifth or sixth dimension, perhaps even the seventh dimension of that moment in time, and the same emotions and the same consciousness could be experienced. And it does fall in line, I believe, with God or a higher power, because God talks about being an invisible spirit, a spirit of pure light. God has this obsession with the number seven, likely the seven dimensions. He has an obsession with light, the highest form of energy, the most ancient, likely the first to ever exist. and he has this obsession with the spirit and with sentience, with love, with a higher order of experience, of feeling. And I believe that that's all perhaps connected. Everything in our brains, the nanotubules, the neurons, the electricity that goes through them, all thanks to photons, all thanks to different levels of energy, of electron energy, which is, I think, in part caused by photons, low level, low energy photons that make up the quarks and gluons and taus, whatever, and those make up the protons and electrons and neutrons, and those make up the atoms, and the atoms make up the molecules and compounds, and those make up the microtubules, and those make up partly the neurons, and the neurons in part make up the brain. So I think it's all related. It all comes down to photons. And I think that if we could imprint the photons, and collect the certain photons, and compact them into a singular state of existence, compact them into a singular point, somewhere along the Planck length, I think we could send them into another dimension where the photons in the seventh dimension could be interpreted as a mountain, or as as the sound of a voice, because and I got this in part from Interstellar, and it may just be nonsensical speculation, but from the Interstellar movie they talk about how love could transcend everything else, and how it could be partly the cause of the bulk being's creation of the fifth dimensional bookcase, hallway infinite thing in the movie, and they talk about how love could be like a mountain or a wave in the ocean, how it could be interpreted as something else in another dimension. And I think that's kind of what it's all about. I think that's what these photons could be, to God, to a higher dimension. It could be, light could be viewed as love, and light itself, in a quantum superpositioning state in the sixth or seventh dimension, which can only the sixth dimension, I think, might be something that angels or demons are aware of, something in a higher state. And I think that the reason why we can't view, and this is getting into even crazier speculation, sort of almost outside of the main topic of the video, but I think that perhaps if there are demons, or interdimensional beings, I think the reason why we don't see them and we can't interact with them and they can't interact with us is because it's like, how can you, as a four-dimensional being, interact with a one-dimensional being? Let's say they exist. How can we get them to perceive us, and how can we perceive them if all they can see and experience is a flat one-dimensional surface and one-dimensional wavelengths of energy? How is it possible to interact with them? And so I think that perhaps angels and demons, demigods, whatever all that is, they're all six-dimensional. And God himself, themself, is a seventh dimensional being, that uses light, energy, and love and spirit in a quantum superposition state to create, to manifest existence in all these multi-dimensional states with all of our elements and all of our emotions and our consciousness and all this. And so it's sort of like God is projecting his light in a multi-dimensional state, sort of like visible light, and how it can create the different wavelengths, and the different nanometers or whatever, to do with red wavelength and yellow and green and blue and I don't know, what is it, orange, red, pink wavelengths of light, whatever. Purple, I think, is technically not visible to us. It's actually an interpretation of red and blue, if I'm correct. And so it's sort of like God is casting down his light and away his awareness of the seven dimensions in spread out parts, like how light can be spread out in different wavelengths with different colors, if that makes sense. And so I think that in the extremely far future, humanity will be able to collect information in some sort of fifth or sixth dimensional format and transfer it to another dimension, to the future, perhaps, to a universe in the further future. And then humanity can, at some point, once it evolves enough, can access that fifth or sixth dimension and acquire that information from humanity before they die off from the big crunch or heat death of the universe. And but of course it would, in each new instance of humanity technologically ascending, we would only be able to acquire that information once we reach the fifth or sixth dimension. So there's only so much we could do to send that information to future humanity in another universe or dimension. But through other dimensions, perhaps we could tweak the photon energy or whatever it may be to send out the information at the beginning of the new universe, the new creation of humanity, so that humanity can use that to immediately technologically advance and reach a somewhat near ascendancy or whatever, not quite God level, right? I don't think that's possible, but we could reach the sixth dimension, physically, and consciously, at the beginning of a new universe, if we could interpret the photon data, or design the photon data to interact with another dimension, to send out the data in the beginning of the next universe immediately, if that makes sense. I don't know if this is making sense. This is the best I can do to explain it, but anyway, tell me what you think about what I've said in the comment section down below. Tell me what you think about my theories on photons and about God being a seven-dimensional being, and tell me what you think about how we could send our knowledge into the future, and perhaps even our experiences, in a way, send them into the future for future humanity to relive, to experience in a way. And check out my other videos and make lots of deep thought, crazy videos like this one. And that's all.